Hey Panda Nation, you are listening to the Inverted Gear podcast with your hosts Nelson and Hillary. Join us every week as we take you behind the scenes into our brand, discuss upcoming projects, and conversate beyond the mat with the interesting people we've met along the way.
Hey Christina, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
We are doing well. It's a beautiful day in Pennsylvania. It's about 75 today, clear sky.
Wow.
So it's like our favorite time of the year. Before it gets really cold, right after it was really hot. So enjoying these few weeks of Goldilocks weather.
Yeah.
There you go.
What part of California are you in again?
I'm in Southern California. I'm in a little city called Riverside. So more inland from, people think like, oh, LA, depending on where in LA I go, it's probably an hour to 2 hours, depending. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Nice.
Yeah. And then for those that don't know you, can you give a quick intro?
Sure. So my name is Christina Gonzales. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt under Steven Martinez at Peerless Jiu-Jitsu here in Corona, California. And I'm also a functional range systems instructor. So I get the great pleasure of traveling and teaching other coaches and trainers how to improve their clients' joint health. And whether that means for them just a better day-to-day life, or for our crowd of people, whether that means being able to do more jiu-jitsu techniques because they're not limited in the way that they can move. So that's kind of the gist of the two main things that I love doing most, was teaching these certifications and teaching people how to move better, and jiu-jitsu. So
that's so cool. And everything was in full display last weekend. We were just watching some of your matches.
Oh, really?
Especially that crazy 50-50 scramble you were on, where like the crowd thought you were gonna break in half, but
yeah, that was
like, no.
Yeah, I honestly was completely clueless to that. To be honest, I at no point felt any discomfort whatsoever. And so it was one of those things that afterward, my teammates were like, man, your legs looked really gross during that match. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, it looked like your legs shouldn't have gone that way. And I didn't think about it at all. And then there's a gal actually that I've competed against her a couple of times at Blue Belt, years ago. And we've just kept in contact. She's a black belt now too. She still trains. She and her husband run a school. And she messaged me and she's like, oh, how was your match with that girl? I've competed against her before. She's super tough. And I was like, yeah, it was a fun back and forth. And I guess she went to watch the replay on Flow. And then she messaged me a few hours later and she goes, girl, my knees hurt watching this. And I was like, what do you mean? And so she sent me screenshots from the recording on Flow. And then I saw what everyone else is seeing and I'm going, oh, that's why. But, it's one of those things that's just, I don't think about. That's kind of the nice thing about when you start to improve your joint health. You're able to acquire more movement skill. Your ability to learn new motor skills goes up. So, back before I started with functional range conditioning, I actually couldn't play De La Riva on one side.
Wow.
Which was weird because I was like, well, I can do it on this side. Why can't I do it on the other side? I don't understand. So I hired a coach and I got an assessment done and I went, oh, well, my hip doesn't rotate that way. So no wonder I can't do De La Riva. And as I continued to improve that, just in live training at practice, one day I just did it and it was like, oh, okay, well now apparently I'm capable of doing it because my hips move that way. And so it kind of just keeps going like that, where now, my teammates are like, your legs are really annoying, because I'm able to, put them places from a lot of places where people wouldn't be able to move their leg in there. So it pays off for sure. And it's like, it's funny. Someone actually just asked me yesterday, excuse me, if FRC was created because of jiu-jitsu. And I was like, no, they just happen to go really well together. So it's like, it's as if they were meant for each other, but it was never, created for that.
The first I became aware of it was through Dewey, who is at the time was a jiu-jitsu black belt already.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is cool. And then still, I was like, I looked at it and I was having like all these knee issues and still ignored it. And
as we all do for a while.
Yeah, for a while. Yeah. And then like one of my friends got really into it, got a certification, our friend Matt. And then he's like, hey, like, you do these drills with me. And my, like, internal external rotation, which is shit. Another way to put it. And then he's like, it's like you're like, your hip is not rotating. So every time you get into the spots, all the pressure goes right to your knee because you don't have a hip in FRC terms.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have it. So like, there's no rotation. So like all this torque is going right to your knee. That's why you keep injuring your LCL and your MCL.
Yep.
So steady diet of like 90-90 and like pedal swells and all the good FRC stuff, and like I haven't had a knee injury in years now.
That's awesome.
And then like also like now, especially with like all the modern leg lock game, like if you don't have that internal external hip rotation, is like you're gonna be in trouble. Like like leg pummeling and coming in and out of those leg entanglements is so big right now.
Oh yeah.
And then like just being able to like be in a leg entanglement without being nervous because you're feeling pressure on your knee, because like if your hip can rotate, you can be in a leg entanglement, you just feel safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's weird to think about too is actually, so the photo that I posted yesterday, that knee is the one that I actually injured last November. I sprained my MCL and PCL, and like obviously I don't have any issue with it now, but it's so weird to go from having gotten injured a year ago to competing at No-Gi Worlds and not noticing anything. But it's actually super common where people will be watching me roll, or someone else who also has like a lot of range of motion, and they're like, oh my gosh, don't do that, your knee. Where it's like even something as common as like a knee slice pass, that people get worried that they're like, oh, like, don't you feel pressure on the outside of your knee? And it's like, I don't, because my hip has so much internal rotation that way. It's not compromising. So yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that you've known of FRC for so long or found it through Dewey. Dewey's a ninja. I watch that guy move and I still am like, I'm so far away from that.
I remember like watching like Dewey videos and I was like, I don't think humans are supposed to move this way. And like, he's doing like his little like slow little hops on his hands, like his hip is just like floating as he goes through it. I was like, I can't imagine rolling with Dewey, what it will feel like. But yeah, like you were saying, like, that once you have that external hip rotation, I think one of the biggest, I play a lot of folding passes. So whenever I roll with somebody that has like that extreme external hip rotation, and then like he can just point his kneecap completely that way, and then it's like, I can't fold that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have that, like, you completely cut off the angle, or if you go the other way, you try to kneecap that person, they can always just leg lasso back.
Yeah.
Because you have this giant range of motion to swim back in.
Totally.
Hillary's like, I hate that.
So, Hillary, how long have you been training?
Since like 2005.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
Long time.
Yeah.
Longer than me.
When did you start?
I started in October of 2011.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Okay. So I just hit 10 years a few weeks ago, but.
Wow.
Very cool.
Time flies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to say, like, the FRC for me, it was a big help, like with my shoulder. Like, I mean, the first exposure I had to it was like watching Dewey, and I'm like, I'm looking away. This is not natural. I don't know. It was a little intimidating, but then
for sure,
like, our friend Matt broke it down a little simpler. Like he would actually run his warm-ups when he taught class.
Oh, okay.
With a lot of like FRC, and that slowing down the stretches for me, and that concentration and like isolation of like the smaller area that you're trying to target really made like a big difference for me and some of my shoulder issues.
Yeah.
That were aggravating me probably since I was a blue belt, not really addressing them, just trying to ignore them until I was a black belt.
Yeah.
I had a lot of time to make up for.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that is pretty common in the jiu-jitsu community, is all of us are so stubborn that, it's like, well, that kind of hurts, but I'm going to go train anyway. And it's not really, I feel like, until something is really actively affecting you on the mat in a bigger way that you're like, I have to do something about this, because all of us are just like, oh, I'm used to discomfort. Right. And so that's something that I think as a community, I'm hoping that in sharing this work with more people, that they realize like that pain or discomfort that you feel regularly, that doesn't have to be your norm. So unfortunately, I think in the jiu-jitsu community, it's kind of a joke, right? Like, you see memes of black belts and people that have just been training for a long time that you're just like, you're wrapped and you look like a mummy because everything is just sore all the time and hurts, but it's something that I think if people were to kind of take a proactive approach to it, they'd really realize how much more longevity they'd get and how much longer they could actually train, without pain and with less likelihood of injury. So hopefully we get to that point. I think it's growing for sure. The awareness is building, but I think we still have a decent way to go.
I mean, we've been beating this gong for a while, and I didn't feel this way until I was like 30. And then we were like pretty gung ho for a long time. Like when Hillary and I met, Hillary had just moved back to the East Coast from the West Coast, and I was teaching classes. So, I was training twice a day, pretty much every day. And we were competing all the time, and we were living by the IBJJF schedule. So it was no time to you got injured, you just kept going.
Yep.
But sometime in my late 20s, I stopped recovering like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly I my nagging injuries just become small permanent disabilities. And I was like, all right, I really got to do something. I remember my hands, because I was doing so much ki too, and I was doing a lot of double sleeve grips. I remember in the morning before I could function, I had to hold a warm cup of coffee for a little bit before my hands would loosen up. And I was like, all right, this is ridiculous. And then I kept injuring my right knee. I kept injuring I would rehab it, take some time off, roll slow, roll with people I trusted, and then get back to rolling, and then I would injure it again and again and again and again. It's just it was this cycle I was stuck in, and I didn't want to be the guy that is oh, I have a bad knee. And then also I was getting older, and I really do enjoy jiu-jitsu, and I really do see myself doing jiu-jitsu as an old man. So I was all right, I got to figure this out. So I remember writing this article for the Inverted Gear blog post about longevity, and then things I'm doing so I can be on the mat as long as possible. And then there's pretty well known black belt, he's reshared on Facebook, he just wrote that he's the gayest thing I ever read.
Oh my gosh.
But at the same time, every time I see the guy's Instagram stories, he's either at a chiro or a PT or getting acupuncture done, because he's so broken. And I'm you have to make a choice eventually of does this matter for you in the long term? And then are you willing to do the work now so you can have a long, whether it's a competitive career or just if you're a hobbyist, just staying on the mat.
Totally.
One of the things our community ignores is the guys that last a long time in the sport or improve the fastest are the guys that stay on the mat and avoid major injuries and surgeries.
Yeah, it's one of those. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's something that that actually really resonated with me a couple of years back. I was at one of our FRC summits with Dr. Spina, and he'd made a comment to all of us coaches there about don't worry about being the weird one in the gym that's not doing all of those same things that everybody else is doing, right? Because everybody else you see in the gym, everyone's doing the same thing. They're squatting, they're deadlifting, they're bench pressing, whatever, which they're not bad exercises, but especially as a jiu-jitsu athlete, where the whole goal of being of the sport and of the martial art is to get someone's joint to its end range of motion and then try to take it farther. So if your range of motion is terrible, you're going to get submitted a lot more quickly. But if you've never trained it, the quality, the health of that joint's probably not to where it could be either. And so something that really stuck with me, because actually at the last gym that I was working at, my old boss used to joke, he was like, I pretty much know that I can walk into the gym at any point and I'll see Christina barefoot doing some sort of FRC something, and it was funny because, as much as I respect that guy and he's worked with a lot of high level athletes and stuff, there was a time when he had all of us coaches going through some new programming that he wanted us to be implementing with the clients. And out of all the coaches that worked with him, I was the only one who could actually do them well, without pain, without some sort of limitation, without something. And so he was having us do them because he wanted us to have done it, to have felt it before obviously we're coaching it to other clients. And man, did I take that opportunity to jump on it though, because, they're teasing me, and it's all in good fun, but they're teasing me like, oh yeah, you should do this every damn day, right, Christina? And I'm going, out of all of you though, as much shit as you guys give me, I was the only one that could actually do the exercises without some sort of like, oh, actually, well, okay, since you can't do this, go do that instead. It's like, well, no, because I've spent time now, a lot of time, years improving on these things so that I can move my hips, my shoulders, my spine, my elbows, whatever it is, so that these exercises you want me to do in the gym, I can do them without a problem, which means, now I have the freedom to do whatever kind of workout that I want versus, oh, I probably shouldn't do that right now because that actually hurts instead of being helpful. And I think that's kind of the thing too, because within really any sport, I feel like in general, it's like everybody just wants to go to the gym and lift, and myself included. I love it. I think everyone should strength train. There's just a whole myriad of benefits to strength training, like in the traditional sense of the word, but nobody wants to be that one person in the gym that's like sitting in a corner working on hip rotation and looking like they're just a bomb that's waiting to go off because they're generating so much force, but there's no weights in sight. And people are like, what is that guy doing over there in the corner? Like, looks kind of weird, right? So I think trying to figure out a way to make the work a little bit more palatable for people, that it just doesn't seem like I have to do what, but I'd rather just go squat, right? So I think that's probably the biggest hurdle right now, is that. But I think the more and more people like the two of you and myself and everybody within the community kind of keeps putting it out there to show really what it can do for you as an athlete or as a hobbyist or whatever it is that you do, to think like, all right, maybe I should actually give this thing a shot, and put that work in to do it. Take some time from lifting the weights to make your joints work how they should be working, and then go back to doing, whatever it is you want to be doing for your workout.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, our community is not very good about, like, we just assume, oh, this is my bad shoulder, this is my bad elbow.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but you can fix it. There are things you can do to get your range of motion back. Mm-hmm. And like Hillary was saying, like, she had a lot of shoulder issues that came from being the smallest person in the gym and being stuck in a defensive posture on her side for how many years.
Very stubborn.
And yes.
But same. So I was going to say, like, now that, especially having your own school, how do you incorporate it? Do you do it like as a warm up, a cool down? Is it just on its own, like off jiu-jitsu days? Like,
so I actually don't have
to focus.
Sure. So I actually, Peerless Jiu-Jitsu is not my school. I happen to teach a women's class there.
Okay.
But it's something that I have run a Kinstretch class there in the past. I think it was probably close to 3 years ago at this point. But it's something I've been meaning to bring up with Professor Steven to start offering again. And I know he's on board with it. He's part of my online Kinstretch community and does that work for himself as well. So a few of my teammates and a few of my students from the women's class are taking part in it. And so I'll see them also, like, before class, they're doing their cars off the side, before and after class and things like that, to just better be prepared for when we just get into training. But it's something like, if down the line, I was to have my own school or anything like that, it's obviously something I would incorporate with all the students, because I've actually had one of our other black belts at Peerless. He had me one time at the end of class. He's like, oh, can you just have us do some sort of cool down something for our hips? I was like, yeah, sure. No problem. But I think if we were to do it, I think if anything, and actually I've had a conversation with Dewey Nielsen about it before, because he doesn't believe in warm-ups. And since having that conversation with him, I completely agree. But if cars could be the warm-up, then cars would be the warm-up for class. And then get into specific techniques and drilling and things like that.
Cool. Yeah, I find, like, now after doing jiu-jitsu for so long, sometimes I don't need the regular warm-up you see where you're going up and down the mat doing the same thing, or the running and the push-ups, but I do like warming up with my cars, and I'll preach, like, to other people too, because they'll ask about the being able to move my hips or my shoulders and being comfortable if my spine goes this way or that way. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you don't have time to do it in your warm-up, do it in your cool down. But I like that maybe just having a Kinstretch class where you can focus on it outside of jiu-jitsu to really hone in on it and spend a little extra time on it?
Yeah, and I think with Kinstretch, the beauty of it is like people like to suffer together. No one really likes to suffer by themselves, right? Like Kinstretch is one of those things. Like I do find it fun. It's kind of miserable when you do it. Just it's hard work. It's not comfortable, right? But I think just like jiu-jitsu, like when you're all suffering together with other people that you care about, like it makes the suffering a little bit better. But also with Kinstretch, I think it's a really good way for people to kind of get their foot in the door for this work, because now it's the community aspect of it. They're getting kind of a taste of it. They're getting cars as the warm up for class, and then they get exposed to different ways to train certain joints, to see like, oh, and then after class, like, man, that felt really good. I can probably do that bit on my own. And as you continue to go to Kinstretch classes, you just get exposed more and more to that thought process, because my goal as a Kinstretch instructor with my students also is to teach them actually how to do the work, so that over, however many months, years, whatever they're doing Kinstretch with me, they're actually learning FRC just over a very long course of time versus if they were to be working with me one-on-one. But even so, like you said, with cars by themselves, it's just, I feel like, we talk about it in the system as it being like the Swiss Army knife, because there's just so much you can do with them. But from a training standpoint, like you said, with using that as a warm up, that's what I do as my warm up too. Because actually, when I do that at a higher intensity than when I roll out of bed, then my joints are prepared to now go get on the mat and train. I've gotten some blood flow into those deeper tissues, and I feel ready to go. But like you said, it's like, okay, if you don't have time before, do it after. And I tell people the same thing. If you can do cars after class, you're going to find that when you wake up the next morning, you're actually probably going to be a lot less sore, because you're getting that blood flow to those deeper tissues. And so you're getting, fresh supply in there. And so cars, even just from an inflammation standpoint, because how many teammates or anything that are taking just like ibuprofen like it's a vitamin, just like, oh, I'm just going to pop a couple more ibuprofen and okay, now I'm good. But I find that when you do a lot more cars at a low intensity, you get that same benefit without having to now drug yourself. And you get the benefit of maintaining the health of your joints at the same time, which you won't necessarily get from just taking more ibuprofen.
Yeah. No, I mean, one of the things we've been talking about, we're opening a school now. We're just waiting on the mats at this point. But
oh, cool.
Again, it's like chain of supply is crazy right now. So
yes,
we're hoping to be open like early December. Mats are supposed to be here mid-November, but I'm not holding my breath.
Sure.
And we're talking about like, fundamentals versus advanced class, and like, what the difference are going to be. And one of the things we talk about is like, when you teach a fundamentals class and you have somebody come in that's maybe never grappled before and maybe hasn't really moved since high school, elementary school.
Yeah.
And like, that's when all like, the car wheels and the forward rolls and the back rolls. And then like, you hear, I'm used to hearing people like, I haven't done a car wheel since 7th grade.
Yeah.
So like, that's when the kid, like, all those drills that, like, as a black belt, you've done them a million times now.
Mm-hmm.
That's where like the value of those drills are, because like, you do have to teach these people how to move, and you do have to get somewhat of a training effect, because they don't know what they're doing. So they're not going to get like anything out of sparring, really.
Yeah.
So like, you like a lot of times, like, when I run a warm up for the fundamentals class, like that's the workout.
Yes.
And then like, you get them breathing a little heavy, you get them nice and warm. Now you teach them like, a few techniques without overloading their brain, because like, everything is so new. And then like, maybe do like a little flow or like very specific sparring at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we go into the advanced class, I think one of the things I like is, like we said, like, not everybody's going to have the same joint issue. So sometimes when like you lead a stretching class, like, this guy has super flexible hamstrings and his hips are great. So like, any drills below his hip is like waste of time, but he has a jacked up elbow or a jacked up shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
So like, being able to get people, I think FRC does a really good job about getting people to realize and self-assess and be like, hey, like, stop stretching like ballerina and actually start working on the joints that need work.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. I think And a lot of people end up getting kind of just caught up in hips and hips and hips and more hips. Like you said, for a lot of people, it's their shoulders too, right? And no one really thinks about it, but it's something that I've mentioned, I think, a couple of times, like, whether it's posts in the past or with students, that, if your shoulders don't move, you're probably the person that as soon as someone locks up a Kimura, you're already tapping because you feel so much pressure in your shoulder and they haven't even moved your arm anywhere yet. It's just from them getting the grip that you're already like, oh, tap, that's it, right? And so, like you said, I think the other common misconception is that stretching is just going to solve all of your problems. Just doing that like all the time. Because, how many people do you see stretching before class, and then, everyone's sitting around talking after class, and everyone's, people are stretching, which stretching is great. And it's 100% a part of the equation, but it's only a part of it, right? Because I think people get caught up in like, well, if I stretch, then I'm going to get more flexible and then I'm good. But what they don't realize is that, okay, you're creating more range, which is awesome. Like, you have to have the range to now get strong in it. But if you only do the stretching part, you're only getting the range without the strength. And we all know that, being on the mats, like, you need to be strong in those ranges of motion too, because like you can be Gumby and, like you said, have the guy that has both knees stuck out, his feet are, his knees are on the ground next to his head. You're trying to like do a folding pass and it doesn't bother him. But okay, how much force can that person now actually push back against you versus just being folded up, like a pretzel, and then they're stuck there because they haven't practiced creating max effort strength out of that position. So, I think that's the beautiful thing about FRC and how it fits so well into jiu-jitsu. It's that, yeah, we're getting more flexible, but you're also getting strong in those positions. Because that's something that I hear from a lot of people are like, oh, it's like you're just trying to make someone into a contortionist or, like a ballerina or this. And it's like, no, I only want to give them the amount of range of motion that they need for whatever it is they do. And as jiu-jitsu practitioners, we do need more range than your average person. But I think if the idea of, okay, stretching and strengthening in a very specific way so that it's actually targeting, like you said, your specific needs, that's, your game and the way you feel in your own body every day is just going to keep improving, and so I think it's just, FRC is snowballing. I think Kinstretch is kind of coming at it from and just building it even more, I feel like Kinstretch is probably an even bigger name right now just because it's work, we've been with Men's Health and this and that, and people see like the teams that are using FRC. But I think the more and more that the word gets out there, hopefully the more jiu-jitsu practitioners will start to figure out like, oh, I probably should implement this into my training so that I don't feel like garbage when I roll out of bed every morning.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I bring up to especially like bigger guys is so many times like they can barely squat or like, sit at the rock bottom of the squat position.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they're there, like, you ask them to like internally rotate their hip or knee, like, bring the knee in or out.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm capable of doing this. And like, you just look at them, it's like, you understand like your guard passing would be better if you were able to do this.
Yeah.
Like you understand, like, in this spot, like, if you're passing guard and you're trying to like, pin somebody's leg down,
mm-hmm.
this would improve your game. And then they're like, you just look at me like, fine. like I guess I'll work on this.
Yeah.
But like, like sometimes like, especially younger guys, it's hard. Like it's hard to get them with the longevity talk. But then when you show them,
yes.
like, hey, look at this, you would score more points.
Exactly.
And sometimes you can get them to go that way. So I know you've FRC, I think one of like my friend Matt likes to joke around. It's like, yeah, that's the thing with all the acronyms.
Yeah.
So I know it can be a little intimidating when you get into it, but
sure.
if you had to pick like a handful of drills for your average jiu-jitsu practitioner, and I know, like we said, it's going to depend on the person.
Sure.
But what are your like top 3 favorite FRC drills for a jiu-jitsu player?
Well, aside from cars, which we already talked about, depending on the person, I think if they can grasp the concept of pails rails, that's going to go a long way, because then essentially and this is again what I talk about even just teaching in my Kinstretch classes, is that you can apply that thought process to any joint in any direction. So once you understand that, okay, if I need more range of motion and strength for my shoulder, and I know that I'm limited maybe rotating my shoulder this way, if I can understand how to stretch and relax into a stretch well and spend some time in there, and then apply the Pales rails, I can do that to any joint moving forward the rest of my life. Because Dr. Chivers, who's another one of our instructors, he teaches a lot of the manual therapy courses. He's said it before, where you kind of never get off that merry-go-round of Pales and rails. It just keeps changing, like which joint you're really currently focusing on in what direction. And so I think, for people now as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, if you think, okay, well, my hip doesn't rotate this way, but I know how to find a stretch in this position, and then I can do Pales rails and apply those isometrics specifically to that joint in that direction, I can spend time. And just like strength training, where you need repeated inputs, you need progressive overload, and all of that, then you can apply that to that joint until you get to a point where you're like, cool, I'm good. I have enough range in this direction. I don't need to focus on that right now. Maybe it's my left elbow. Maybe you want to do gi pull-ups after class, but you get elbow pain every time you're doing it. Okay, well, maybe I see, like, does my elbow rotate? And I find, okay, I know how to get my elbow. Does it actually go that way? Oh, it doesn't? Okay, I know how to find a stretch here that I can apply Pales rails. So I think that's a really big one, because you can also vary the intensity, just like we vary the intensity of when we go to the gym. Sometimes maybe you're doing a max effort, other times you're focused more on hypertrophy, other times you're focused more on muscular endurance, and so I tell my clients the way that I like to program with them, because most of them that come to me initially, like, they need more range of motion in certain areas. And so that becomes the priority, because if they don't have the range, then everything else doesn't even matter yet. We have to get them to have the range they need. So Pales rails are a huge component of that. And so, yeah, they're going to have their high intensity days training, doing their Pales and rails and doing their cars. And on the days in between, I want them doing low intensity. They're going to hold stretches for longer periods of time. They're going to do Pales still, but instead of trying to do a max effort isometric, they're going to do 30 or 40%. And they're going to hold that isometric for longer, because now they're going to start to be able to create some change in whatever joint that we're trying to create change in, and they're getting consistent input to it. Just like when we go to jiu-jitsu, maybe we have days when you're like really sparring very intensely, and then you have days where you're just drilling, right? But you're still getting that mat time every day, so you're still getting better at whatever the thing is. Same thing goes with your joints, where you can apply it every day, but I don't want you doing max effort every day, or you're just going to run yourself into the ground. So I think if you can wrap your mind around cars and Pales rails, of just finding a stretch, being able to spend time in that, and then doing your strength training there, I think even just those two right now would be huge. Speaking to the population of people who maybe are more limited in their range of motion. Obviously, we have some people like Ryan Hall who are like just bendy in all directions, and so for them, it would be a little bit different if someone is coming to me already super flexible. But I feel like for the vast majority of people that I've seen anyway, that train with, more people need more range than not.
Yeah. I think what I always find it, like external hip rotation and internal hip rotation seems to be like the secret sauce of like modern jiu-jitsu right now. Like we talk about the leg entanglements, or like I know one of the guys that works with us, he's a purple belt. He manages a warehouse for Inverted Gear. Okay. And he came in limping though. I was like, what happened to you? He's like, oh, so-and-so was teaching K-guard. And I was like, you hurt yourself doing K-guard? He's like, yeah. I was like, he's like, your hip doesn't rotate that way. Don't you pull it in place and like pull somebody on top of you.
This guy's a big child.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're like, oh man, come on. So yeah, I mean, like you see that all the time though. Like I think we fail to understand like I've been like beating this drum for a long time, like getting guys to like sit in seiza or like, you know, bottom squat, and just getting like, you know, being able to get your butt to your calves when you're like kneeling. If you don't have that range of motion and you're doing jiu-jitsu, somebody's gonna go to sweep you or like land on top of you, and like is gonna find that range of motion for you, and like just not the
exactly.
way you want that
like
to
not
happen.
In a good way. No.
Like I remember like I wrestled in high school, and this kid broke his arm, I think like second practice, and he stuck around, and he was like in a sling for like 2 months. So like at the end of the season, he's like, oh, I can come back to practice, and like his arm could not bend all the way. So first 10 seconds, he's shooting somebody. Of course, a terrible shot because he hasn't done anything in 2 months. The kid sprawls on him. He lands on the floor, and we just hear a crack, like, you know, from one side of the gym to the other, because his arm just suddenly, you know, found the range of motion. And of course, the kid is like 14 and he was fine, but when you're older, you don't get lucky like that.
No, definitely not. Yeah, and I think you know, so I've taken like polls and things on Instagram. So I'm always curious, you know, with jiu-jitsu, if you're like, what is your biggest ache every, like, if I think I asked probably a month ago now, like, if you could pick one joint that you wish would feel better regularly, I think the top one was like knees, and then closely followed by hips. Because most people don't, like, how do you train your knee? If you were just to ask any random person that walks in the door at the academy, like, what do you do to train your knees? People are like, nothing. I squat. It's like, well, you use your knees to squat, but you're not really training your knee specifically,
like leg
right?
Extension.
Yeah, right. Which is like, those are important parts, but I think the rotation part, like you said, especially with the leg entanglements now and heel hooks being now allowed in IBJJF and all these, you know, big, like with who's number one and just everything, like all that stuff goes now. And so I think that we're going to see injury rates keep going up. One, because a lot of people still don't know how to defend them well, just because they haven't been widely legal for a long time. And then two, people, they don't train their knees, and their knees don't move and have that range to rotate, you know, to absorb that force with the heel hook. So I think that's a big one. And like you said, with the injuries too, that's the other beautiful thing I think that has given myself and then my clients kind of that power too, of having the tool of like knowing what to do when you get injured. Because a lot of us do think like, all right, I'm just going to rest and ice and take ibuprofen. I'll take a week off and then I'll go back. But in that time, like the inflammation's going down, which you need to happen, and you're resting, which is part of the equation. But right away when that injury happens, you know, aside from inflammation, and once you can get that down, your body is looking for input on how to heal properly. So if there's no movement happening, like you said, that guy on your wrestling team was just in the sling for however long, took the sling off, and now he can't move. Well, it's like he never moved it to tell his arm, okay, like to tell the tissue there, like it needs to be able to move this direction and absorb force this direction and produce force this direction. And so, you know, when we get injured now, like again, coming back to cars, I'm doing as many freaking cars as I can in a pain-free range all day long. Like when I first injured my knee last year, it was the same thing. I was like, my knee cars were so much smaller because I couldn't bend my knee like past 90 anyway. But just being able to do that on repeat and still give the input. And then as that range kind of continued to increase, and doing, again, the low level pails, because isometrics, like they don't cause damage to tissue. So you're getting the strength benefits of it, and you're getting the input that you need. But you're not, you know, it's not like doing eccentrics where now you're actually creating that. And so being able to apply that when you get injured on the mat, you know, is huge to being able to get back sooner, because you're actually telling whatever joint you injured, all right, well, I'm going to get this inflammation down, and now I'm going to start to actually heal well. The new tissue that's going down in there is going to lay down better so that I can, you know, heal properly. So hopefully down the line, the likelihood of you getting injured again is going to be less too.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things too, I think it's a problem I think sports medicine in general is like sometimes people get injured and then the first stop is the orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah.
Who is like, you know, that's like the guy makes money by cutting into you. So if you ask him his opinion, he's gonna be like, yeah,
touche.
We
Yes.
need to cut into this.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I remember having a training partner, like was having like shoulder impingement issues. And then we asked him, he's like, oh, how does it feel when you hang from a pull-up bar?
Uh-huh.
And it's like, oh, it feels so much better, blah, blah, blah. So we're trying to get him to do like pelvis rails.
Uh-huh.
And then he's like, oh, it's like, yeah, it feels better when I do that, but my orthopedic surgeon thinks I should have surgery. I'm like, yeah, no shit, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. No, you're totally right. And it's something that, you know, I get kind of often too, like, oh, so-and-so thinks I should do surgery. And like you said, like if their job is to cut you open and that's how they make money, like a lot of people, that's going to be their first, you know, response is, yeah, I think you need surgery, which one, I got really lucky because when I hurt my knee, you know, I actually went to one of our FR therapists, who's the one I go to and I send my clients to, and he referred me to an ortho that he trusts. And that guy was amazing. You know, he was like, no bullshit, just, you know, as soon as he figured out, you know, we figured out what was up with my knee, he's like, you know,
Sorry, Christina, I got the little one trying to get YouTube working after his nap.
oh, that's okay. No problem.
So,
Yeah. But yeah. So finding the orthopedic surgeon, just having not be like the first line of defense of like, oh, I got injured, I need to have surgery. Because unfortunately, I think a lot of people fall victim to that. And sometimes do you need surgery? 100%. But I think a lot of times you don't, and people just don't know how to move forward with an injury and how to like rehab properly, you know, because I've had clients too who are jiu-jitsu athletes that have said the same thing, and they're, while they're working with me, they're also simultaneously going to a PT, and then they're telling me like, man, my PT said my range of motion is so much better, they're asking me what I'm doing, you know, which is crazy to me because I'm not a PT at all. Like, I just, thank God, found functional range conditioning, and, you know, thank God Dr. Spina and Dr. Chivers decided to create this whole thing, because now I think so many more people are getting that benefit. But it's still crazy to me because in my mind, I'm like, I'm just a trainer, and I now obviously have this great, like, powerful tool to help my clients. But it's wild to hear like, oh, I'm going to this physical therapist or I'm going to this chiro, and they're asking me what I'm doing because I'm moving so much better now. I'm like, isn't that their job though? Like, that's their job. They're supposed to be doing this. I'm glad I'm able to help you in that now that's the case. But I wish more people in like the fitness industry and people who are in charge of other people's health knew about this work, and or just wanted to actually put the time. Because unfortunately, I think a lot of practitioners, regardless of the field, but just in the health and wellness, you know, space in general, kind of just get comfortable coasting. They're like, I'm making good money, I can just keep doing what I'm doing, I don't have to change anything, and so I'm just going to keep doing that. And so having to put more effort in to learn something else and then spend more time with clients just doesn't sound as appealing, which sucks. But I think, you know, that's why I always get really excited when I meet other people who understand it, who get it, and want to help others and spread the message, and, you know, who are in the industry for the right reasons of like actually legitimately wanting to help the people that come to them, whether it's their jiu-jitsu students versus, you know, someone coming to me saying like, I can't move my shoulder this way, it hurts, and getting them to be able to move better again, to go back to doing whatever it is they want to do with their body.
Yeah, I mean, finding a good PT, it's at some point an important part of anybody's jiu-jitsu journey.
Yes,
it's like, you know, whether we want it or not, eventually something's going to go wrong. Something like, you know, we're not going to tap on time, or training partner is going to roll on top of us.
Yep.
Sometimes, like, you know, the group next to us is the one that gets you injured.
Yep.
And then those are the worst, you know. And yeah, like you said, it's just knowing how to rehab and how to. That's what like so good about the system, because I heard that that counsel before, like, hey, like, you know, you injured yourself or you sprained something, like, you know, try to move it.
Yeah.
And like keep your range of motion, but like, yeah, but like, how am I moving it? And like, until I learned about cars, it's like, oh, this is what they meant. Because like, if I injure my elbow and all I'm doing is up and down, but there's no rotation in there, that's a problem. And like, like clubs and maces are getting really popular now.
Yeah.
And it's very common people are giving themselves like tennis elbow or golf elbow because they don't have rotation, and suddenly they're swinging this like 15-pound lever, and like suddenly the lever is gonna rotate your arm whether you want it or not. And then suddenly people have tendonitis. They're like, oh, like why is my
why is my elbow hurt?
Good for my elbow. Yeah, it's like, one, you went too hard at it, and two, is like, yeah, your joint was not ready for the exercise.
Totally. It's interesting. I actually taught an FRC seminar here in Southern California. I think it was last month. Must have been last month. And it's something that when we get to elbows and teaching elbow cars, I actually asked, because it's a room full of trainers, and I actually asked the question, like, how many of you feel pain when you bench press? And it's like, so many hands go up. I'm like, how many of you feel pain when you're doing pull-ups? And again, so many hands go up. And I'm like, how many of you have ever thought about training your elbows in rotation? And then maybe one hand or two, And so just understanding your own body more and what you're asking it to do to then recognize, like, okay, well, I'm going to pick up these kettlebells. I'm going to pick up this mace. I'm going to do this thing, to then go back and realize, like, oh, well, why is it my elbow hurts? Versus being able to think about that ahead of time. Like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. I need this to happen. Maybe I can better prepare my joint to do that thing, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing, and we're like, I like to pick on the jiu-jitsu community about this, but like, this is everywhere. Like, I know CrossFitters, same thing. It's just like they're like reeling to their numbers and like, this and that, but like a lot of times fail to prepare themselves, and then like, they're doing like this very high volume stuff, and then like, something goes wrong because you're repeatedly putting yourself through that motion. It's a problem. Like I remember like the kettlebell community had an issue for a while when, especially early on the kettlebells. I've been doing kettlebells since 2007.
Oh wow!
And back then, like the secret service snatch test and all these snatch tests were like, that was the thing to do, and like people were like, yeah, and you test your VO2 max and this and that, and they were like jumping into like super high volume, super high intensity, like snatch workouts without preparing themselves, and then just wrecking their shoulder because like they didn't have the range of motion, and then like the kettlebell is just jamming the shoulder backwards over and over again.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Yeah.
2021. Hopefully the message is getting out there.
Man, I hope so.
Take care of your joints. You want to be around for a long time, and you slowly but surely, like you can't, like, no matter whatever injury you have, unless it needs surgery, you're most likely to not be able to like get some of that range of motion back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if people can even reach, because obviously like doing this work, I think if you can do it in person with someone, that's always going to be better, just from a learning experience and getting to understand it better. But there's so many options now to find somebody online to train with or work with or learn from, that there's really at this point, and whether people reach out to me, like I always still be like, hey, I want to work with you. I'll still ask, where do you live? Because I'd rather connect you with somebody near you in person that I trust before you say, I'd rather train with you online if we live nowhere near each other. Because the jiu-jitsu community, with it being something that I love so much, I hate seeing people out of the game because of an injury or just nagging pain on a regular basis. That it's like, you don't have to live like that. I'm telling all of you right now, you don't have to just accept it and think, all right, well, I'm just going to keep training, but this is just the way that I'm going to feel now. It's not the case.
The problem too is like, especially when you're doing jiu-jitsu for a long time, like these injuries happen, it's very easy to lose track of what your joint used to move like.
Oh yeah.
So like there's like an injury, and then like suddenly your knee doesn't bend that way, or like a lot of people are like completely unaware of is like the way their back segments, like their spine, curves at one spot.
Yes.
And everything else is stiff, and you're like you tell them, it's like, dude, like when you go in inverted, your back hurts because you're like, you folded at one point like a piece of paper.
Yeah.
There's like no curve to your spine whatsoever. They're like, well, no, what are you talking about? I can berimbolo. I was like, I understand you get through it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's good for you long term.
Exactly. And I think that's the other kind of thing that's like, it's a beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu, but it also, I think, makes it harder for people to care about taking care of their joints, because there's so many ways that you can alter a technique to fit what your body can currently do, that it's like, all right, well, I can't finish it this way, so I'm going to just tweak like this, and then I can still finish the submission, right? Yeah. But things like that where it's like, yeah, man, your back moves in one spot. So every time you invert to try to do that berimbolo, all that force is going into that one spot. And eventually that one spot's going to get pissed off, and you're going to be like, oh shit, my back, you know? Yeah, it's like,
the other thing too is that you can tell somebody, it's like, oh, you got to do like cat camels and like, work on segmenting your spine.
Yeah.
But if somebody's not looking at you and like actually like pointing and touching, like prodding you, is like, hey, like this is not moving at all. It's really hard to get that exercise to actually do anything for you. So like, I remember like throwing that into my warm up here and there. And then like my friend Matt was like, hey, like, you're bending like 2 spots. The rest is like not doing anything. Right. And then he's like, he poking me. He's like, hey, like move this, move this. And like me having to like, almost like a child, like having to like, when you teach a kid to like close one eye instead of both.
Sure.
Same thing. So my brain is just like trying to like make this happen. And it seems like a silly thing, but like until you have somebody like hands-on with you, like, walking you through some of these drills and like, the details do matter. So like having somebody there and like, same like the 90-90 stretch looks so simple. It's like, oh, like I put my leg here, my other leg's back there. But like, if you're not in the right alignment and like you're not putting the forces where they're supposed to be going, like you don't really get much out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like the intent is everything. And like you said, having that, we call this like tactile feedback, like someone getting hands-on with you. I mean, think about it when you're coaching a jiu-jitsu class, right? You have some students that you can just be coaching them from 10 feet away and tell them something and they'll do it because they get it. There's some that like, if you show it and they watch it, they're like, cool, I got it. And then you have some students that you can tell them, you can show them, and they're just like, they're lost. But the second you like put your hands on them and you move their leg where it has to go, they're like, oh, I get it now. So it's the same thing with this. Like you said, with the spine, especially, I always tell my clients, I'm like, the spine is probably going to be the most frustrating and the most boring that I'm going to teach you, but it's probably also the most valuable, because like you said, like you could be trying to move your spine and you think you're moving it one segment at a time, but until someone walks up to you and you're like, hey man, you're only moving at 2 spots. It's like, damn it, I thought I was doing well, Yeah. But until someone gets hands-on and like puts their fingers on your spine to like move right here, then it's pretty hard to do. So I actually teach it, we call it hinge point training, where you're like flipped over on your back. And I like to use, those pink school erasers that kids take. So I actually use those. And I'll have my it's like, I just have a bag of those like in the locker at work that I just hand out to people. And I actually, weirdly enough, I carry mine around like it's in my bag, it's just always with me. So if you like, hey Christina, do you have that eraser? I actually do have it on me. But being able to put that, like laying on your back with your knees bent, putting that eraser under one spot on your back. And then I always tell my clients, like, set a timer on your phone for like 3 minutes, and then close your eyes, feel where that eraser's at. And now you're trying to put pressure down onto that eraser, like you're flexing and rounding your back down onto it, but try to move just that spot. Because a lot of people, they're going to dump like their whole low back into it. And that's part of the learning process, is failing at it in the beginning. And I get people telling me like, I can't seem to do it without moving like my hips and my legs and like literally everything to try to move one spot on my spine. And unfortunately, the answer is like, you have to do it more often, because people just lose that ability to connect with their spine, or, like we do in the gym and whatever. You're just like, I don't know how to contract that muscle. Well, it's the same thing when you go to move your spine. If you've not tried to intentionally move it for a really long time, it's going to take a little while to regain that connection. But I tell you, like, pick that one segment and then stick with it for at least a few weeks. And then once you feel like, oh, okay, I'm actually moving now at that spot, I feel like, take that eraser and literally just move it up one segment, and that's it. And now you're setting your timer and you're working on that spot. So having that, I think, is probably the best thing if you don't have someone with you at home that can, like, actually, if you're doing like the cat camel, to put their fingers on your spine. Like, all right, we'll take this eraser, a marker, something that's going to give you a little bit of feedback when you're laying on your back, and do that. That one's super helpful to do.
That's brilliant. That's awesome. I'm going to play around with that.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I mean, when we teach jiu-jitsu, like part of that too is like getting a new person, especially like anybody, to do anything where their hips are above their shoulders, like the basic armbar. Getting them to stack themselves into an armbar sometimes, especially like an armbar specifically because you have to like turn as you do it.
Yeah.
And then getting people to like get their hips to turn and move that way, like they understand what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But they don't understand how to move their body that way. So that's why, like, this stuff, like, not only is the flexibility and the strength, but like, it's getting you to know your body better and like bring some kinesthetic awareness back and like, where your body is in space and like, what it's actually doing and like what's bending and where are you rotating. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, that's some of the other feedback that I'll get from people is that as they get more into Kinstretch and FRC, they realize the more, when they thought they were moving their shoulder, they were moving their shoulder and their spine and something else. And they're like, I'm realizing I can actually move it way less, but that awareness of what's actually my shoulder versus what's my spine versus what's my shoulder blade that's moving is now translating over to when I'm working out, or it's translating to when I'm rolling and like trying to do this technique. And so you said bringing that kinesthetic awareness, I think is huge. Like some of the best athletes that you see are people that are very body aware, right? Like they move well and they can control those things. So it's like you said, if you get the person that maybe hasn't played any sports since junior high or high school and then took 10, 12, 15 years off and then decided I'm going to start jiu-jitsu, the likelihood that they're well connected with their body is pretty low. So it just takes a while for them to figure out like, oh no, it's like move your hips out. And then they turn their shoulders like this and like, no, your hips, and being able to figure out how to move those things and be connected with it. I think, like you said, in general with jiu-jitsu and with the FRC work helps kind of build that back. Yeah,
for sure. All right, Christina, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you online?
Sure. So my Instagram is at coach_Christina Marie, and Christina is a CH. And then I do have a website. I don't really use it for a whole lot, if I'm being honest, but you can contact me through there. And that's coachchristinaMarie.com, coach_ChristinaMarie.com. And then I do have my online Kinstretch platform as well, where people can, it's just like a monthly subscription based type of thing where you can have your own membership, manage it yourself. And there's just pre-recorded videos that you can follow along at whenever you actually have time in your schedule. Cause I recognize, people don't have all the time in the world. Everyone's schedules are a little crazy. So it's just, everything's up there for when you actually do have time that you can sit down and just, instead of having to go to a coach, you can just hit play and follow along and do the work yourself that way too.
Awesome. Would you recommend somebody that's getting into FRC try that if they don't have anybody local?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the route that I go, is like, if there's no one near them, I'll recommend jumping into online Kinstretch first, because then they'll start to, again, get exposed to some of the different principles. And I have it broken down in there of like how to do a Pales Rails, how to do, all these different acronyms that you're talking about, so that they're not lost when they get into a class. And then hopefully in time, there will be an in-person practitioner near them that I can refer them to. But if there's not an option, then yeah, online Kinstretch is where it's at.
We'll put some links on the show notes, because there was a lot of acronyms being thrown around this episode.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to clear those up for everybody.
All right. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening, Panda Nation. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Inverted Gear podcast. You can find us at invertedgear.com as well as your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to give us a like, and we'll see you soon.